All right, so avian flu, it's been making headlines, and frankly, it's pretty unsettling stuff.
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, it's not just birds we have to think about anymore.
Right, that's what's really got me on edge, this whole dairy cow thing.
You're talking about this HPAI-A H5N1 strain, specifically clade 2.3.4.4b.
Exactly. It's showing up in their milk, too.
Mm.
High concentrations.
Yeah, that research is pretty alarming.
Cows and flu. I mean, come on. What's going on? We got a ton of research papers to dig into here.
We do. There's been a lot of work on this lately.
And honestly, I'm a little nervous about what we're going to find.
Well, I get that. It is a bit unnerving. But hey, let's not hit the panic button just yet.
Okay.
Deep breaths.
Deep breaths. Avian flu is not exactly new, you know. It's
Yeah.
been on our radar for decades, since 1959, actually.
Right. I remember learning about that H5N1 outbreak in Hong Kong back in 97.
Yes. 1997. That was a real wake-up call.
It was the first time it jumped from birds to humans, right?
Yep. And it was a bad one, too. Out of 18 people who got infected, 6 of them died. Wow. That's a mortality rate of over 30%. That's incredibly high.
It is for any infectious disease, really.
So that's where the H5N1 story begins.
Yeah.
But what's different now? Why is this current strain, this 2.3.4.4b clade, why is it acting so different?
Good question. Think of viruses like these evolving blueprints. They're constantly changing this particular clade. Well, it popped up in 2020 and it took over globally.
Just outcompeted all the other strains.
Exactly. It spread like wildfire, too, across Asia, Europe, Africa, the Americas. No continent was spared.
And it's not just the spread. It's what it's doing to the birds themselves.
No, absolutely. In the past, ducks, they were pretty resistant to H5N1. This strain, though, it's hitting them hard, along with a bunch of other waterfowl, too.
So we're seeing these massive die-offs in bird populations that have never experienced anything like this.
Exactly. It's pretty unprecedented.
Okay, so it's wiping out birds, spreading globally. And now it's jumping to mammals, too. And not just like foxes and cats. We're talking marine mammals, too. Dolphins, seals, sea lions, even rodents.
It's a pretty broad range of mammals, for sure.
How is that even happening?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's clear this strain is different, more effective at infecting mammals, and it's doing so across a wider range. We've never seen this before.
And then there's the whole dairy cow mystery. You said the virus is showing up in their milk? High concentrations, too. How does a respiratory virus end up in a cow's milk? I don't get it.
Yeah, it's definitely unusual. It suggests a different transmission route than what we typically see.
Researchers are stumped.
Well, they're working on it. They found that injecting the virus directly into a cow's mammary gland causes a severe infection. But when they try to infect them through their respiratory system, nothing. It just doesn't take hold.
So maybe it's spreading through milking equipment.
That's a strong possibility. Think about it. The equipment comes into contact with multiple cows.
Right.
If one cow's milk is contaminated, it could easily spread to the others.
That makes sense. But what about the humans working on these farms? Are they at risk?
So far, there's been a few cases. 1 dairy farm worker and 9 poultry cullers. They all developed conjunctivitis.
Wait, conjunctivitis, like pink eye?
Yeah, pink eye.
So this virus, it's not just going after the respiratory system.
It seems that way. There's something interesting about the conjunctiva, you see. The membrane that lines the eye. It actually has receptors similar to those found in birds. It's possible the virus is binding to those receptors.
And infecting the eye directly.
That's the thinking, yeah.
Okay, that is a bit creepy. So spread through milking equipment.
Yeah.
Possibly through the eyes. It really makes you wonder if this virus is adapting to mammals, humans included.
It's a valid concern, and there have been documented cases of mammal-to-mammal transmission, mink and sea lions specifically, which is definitely a cause for concern.
So the big question then is, could this strain evolve to spread easily between humans?
That's the question keeping a lot of scientists up at night.
Have we seen any sustained human-to-human transmission yet?
Not yet. Since 1997, there have been 927 human cases reported globally.
927.
It is, and 10 of those were right here in the U.S., just this year, in 2024. But all those cases were linked to direct contact with infected birds or poultry, not from other humans.
Okay, so no human-to-human transmission yet. But with the virus spreading more easily among mammals, couldn't that change?
It's definitely possible. And that's why scientists are racing to understand this virus, to track its mutations, and develop effective vaccines and treatments.
Speaking of mutations, there's been a lot of talk about those. Can you explain what they are and why they're so important?
Sure. Think of mutations as typos in the virus's genetic code. They happen randomly as the virus replicates. And sometimes these typos, they change how the virus behaves.
So they're making the virus more dangerous.
Some of them could be, yes. For example, scientists have observed specific mutations in the dairy cattle strain, things like PB2 M631L and PA K497R.
Those names are a mouthful.
They are. And these mutations, they raise questions about whether the virus is getting better at infecting mammals.
So they're like red flags, basically signaling potential changes in how the virus spreads and how it causes disease.
Exactly. And there are other mutation scientists are watching closely too, like changes to the HA and NA genes. Those are basically the keys the virus uses to unlock and enter host cells.
So any changes to those genes could make the virus better at infecting humans.
That's the worry. And the more the virus spreads, the more chances it has to mutate. That's why controlling it in birds is so crucial.
It sounds like we're in a race against time here. On one side, this virus that's constantly mutating and evolving, and on the other, scientists trying to understand it and figure out how to fight it.
It's a constant back and forth, and the stakes are incredibly high. A global pandemic caused by a highly pathogenic avian flu strain could be devastating.
We've seen what a pandemic can do, even with a virus that's far less deadly than avian flu.
And this particular strain has the potential to be much more lethal.
So this is definitely something we need to stay focused on. What can our listeners do to stay informed and protect themselves?
Honestly, the best thing right now is to just stay informed, follow the recommendations of public health authorities, no need to panic, but be aware of the risks. Take precautions.
Solid advice. We'll be back after a short break to discuss what researchers are doing to fight this threat and what a potential avian flu pandemic might look like.
You know, before the break, we were talking about what people can do to protect themselves. And I mentioned staying informed and following recommendations, but honestly, there's not a whole lot individuals can do right now besides that.
That's kind of unsettling, isn't it? Like all we can do is sit and wait.
Well, not exactly. I mean, while individuals might not have much direct control, scientists are definitely not just twiddling their thumbs.
Right. They're working on this, aren't they?
Absolutely. On multiple fronts. And one of the most promising areas is antiviral research.
Oh, yeah. We talked about antivirals earlier, but we didn't really get into the specifics. How do they work against a virus like this?
Okay, so basically, antivirals are like these tiny wrenches. They get thrown into the virus's machinery, and they mess things up. They stop the virus from replicating and spreading.
So they don't actually kill the virus, they just slow it down.
Exactly. And that gives our immune systems a fighting chance to kick in and clear the infection.
Makes sense. So it's like giving our bodies a helping hand.
Exactly. And the good news is that some of the antivirals we already have, like oseltamivir and zanamivir, they seem to work against this particular strain of avian flu.
Okay, that is good news. But earlier you mentioned antiviral resistance. Is that something we need to worry about?
It's definitely something to keep in mind, yeah.
Yeah.
It's always a risk with any antiviral treatment. As the virus replicates, it can make mistakes. Those typos in the genetic code we discussed.
Right, right. And sometimes those mistakes can make the virus resistant to the drugs.
Exactly. It's like the virus learns to dodge the wrench.
Sneaky little buggers.
Yeah.
So the more we use antivirals, the more likely this resistance is to pop up.
Yeah, that's the tricky part. We need to use antivirals to treat severe cases and stop outbreaks. But we have to be careful not to overuse them. We don't want to create a situation where the drugs stop working.
It's a balancing act. So what are scientists doing to address this resistance issue? Are they working on new types of antivirals?
Oh, absolutely. They're constantly developing new ones and exploring different ways to combat resistance. One promising approach is to develop drugs that target very specific parts of the virus, parts that are less likely to mutate.
Ah, so instead of attacking the whole virus, they're going after its weak spots.
That's a great way to put it, like finding the Achilles heel of the virus. And there are other strategies too, like combination therapies. That's where you use multiple antivirals at once. It makes it much harder for the virus to develop resistance.
Makes sense. So it's like hitting it from all sides.
Exactly.
So it sounds like a lot is happening on the antiviral front. But what about vaccines? Aren't those our best bet for preventing a pandemic?
Vaccines are a crucial part of the solution, no doubt. And the CDC is working on developing candidate vaccine viruses as we speak, specifically for this strain.
And we talked about how some existing vaccines show cross-reactivity. That's a good sign, right? Does that mean those vaccines might offer some protection?
It's possible, and it's something researchers are definitely looking into. But even if those existing vaccines offer some protection, we still need a vaccine that's specifically designed for this strain.
Why is that? I mean, if those other vaccines work, even a little bit, wouldn't that be better than nothing?
A vaccine tailored to this specific strain is likely to be much more effective and provide longer-lasting immunity. Remember, this virus is a shapeshifter. It's constantly mutating. Existing vaccines might work now, but they might not work as well as the virus evolves.
So a new vaccine would give us a better chance of keeping up with the virus as it changes.
Exactly. But vaccine development takes time. It's a complex process. We have to identify the right targets, develop the vaccine, test it in clinical trials, and then manufacture and distribute it all on a large scale.
That sounds like a logistical nightmare,
Yeah.
especially considering how urgent this situation is.
It's definitely a huge undertaking. And there are other challenges too, like ensuring equitable access to the vaccine globally. It doesn't matter if we have a great vaccine if only certain countries can get it.
Right. We need a solution that works for everyone.
Exactly. So vaccines are crucial. But we need to be realistic about the timeline and the challenges. And we can't rely solely on vaccines either. We need a multi-pronged approach. Surveillance, antiviral development, public health measures, international collaboration. It all has to work together.
Okay, so it's not as simple as just finding a vaccine and calling it a day. We need a more comprehensive strategy, one that addresses all aspects of the threat. It makes me wonder, though, with all these efforts, can we actually prevent a pandemic? Or is it inevitable?
That is the question, isn't it? We've talked about the virus, its mutations, the research, but to really answer that question, we need to zoom out a little. What if, despite everything we do, this virus figures out how to spread easily between humans? How would that change things?
It's not a thought I like to dwell on, but it's an important question.
You're right. We've all lived through the COVID-19 pandemic, right? But a pandemic caused by this avian flu strain could be much worse. Remember that 30% mortality rate we talked about?
Yeah, it was pretty scary. I don't even want to think about what that kind of mortality rate would do to the world.
It would be catastrophic. Imagine schools shutting down again, businesses closing, travel restrictions, hospitals overflowing with patients struggling to breathe. The healthcare system would be completely overwhelmed.
It sounds like something out of a nightmare, a dystopian movie.
It does, doesn't it? But the impact wouldn't stop there. Think about the economy. Global trade would likely collapse. Food shortages would be widespread. The financial consequences would be unimaginable.
It's a truly terrifying thought. But we can't just give in to fear, right? We have to be proactive. We have to prepare.
You're absolutely right. We can't wait until it's too late. We need to invest in pandemic preparedness now.
So what does that look like? What specific steps should we be taking?
Well, first things first, we need to strengthen our public health infrastructure. That means better surveillance systems to track the virus, more labs to test and diagnose, and stronger healthcare systems that can handle a surge in patients.
We also need to learn from the mistakes we made during COVID.
Absolutely. We need better communication between governments, health agencies, and healthcare providers. And we need to build trust with the public, make sure everyone has access to accurate information.
That's so important. But it all feels so big, so overwhelming. What can we do as individuals to make a difference?
The most important thing is to stay informed, like we talked about. Understand the risks, follow the recommendations of public health experts, and don't spread misinformation.
Check your sources, folks. What about if a vaccine becomes available?
Get vaccinated. It's the best way to protect yourself and the people around you.
It's a good reminder that we all have a role to play in this. We're not powerless.
Exactly. We can't just sit back and expect governments and scientists to fix everything. We have to take responsibility for our own health and the health of our communities.
Well said. This is a heavy topic, but I think it's a conversation we need to be having. The more we understand about this potential threat, the better prepared we'll be.
I agree. Knowledge is power, especially when it comes to things like emerging infectious diseases.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into avian flu, what are the key takeaways for our listeners?
Well, first and foremost, this is not just a bird problem. This HPAI, H5N1 strain, is infecting mammals, and it's getting better at it.
And those mutations, the red flags, they could signal that the virus is becoming more dangerous.
Exactly. Scientists are working hard on vaccines and antivirals, but it's a race against time. This virus doesn't stand still.
And while a human pandemic isn't a certainty, the potential consequences are so serious, we can't afford to ignore this.
We need to be prepared. We need to invest in public health, improve communication, and stay informed.
Excellent points. This deep dive has been eye-opening. A bit scary, to be honest, but it's also empowering. It's a reminder that we do have the knowledge and the tools to face this challenge. It's up to us to use them wisely.
Well said. This avian flu situation is a wake-up call. It reminds us that the threat of these emerging infectious diseases is real, and it's something we need to take seriously.
It's a call to action. We need to be vigilant, stay informed, and most importantly, stay healthy.
Couldn't agree more.
Well, folks, that wraps up our deep dive into the world of avian flu. Thank you for joining us, and we'll catch you next time on The Deep Dive. So we've talked a lot about avian flu, the history, the new strain, this whole pandemic possibility.
It's a lot.
It's a lot to process, but, it's important to focus on what we can do,
Right.
not just the scary stuff.
I like that. So where do we go from here? What can our listeners do to feel a little less helpless?
Well, knowledge is power, right?
Yeah.
Just by listening to this deep dive, you're already way ahead of the curve. You're informed.
Right. Ignorance is definitely not an option here.
Nope. Stay up to date on the latest info from reliable sources like the CDC, the World Health Organization. Don't fall for the hype and misinformation online.
Check your sources, people. But beyond staying informed, what else can we do? This feels like a huge global thing, like it's out of our hands.
I can feel that way, yeah. But global issues, they're made up of individual actions. You
Yeah.
can make a difference.
Advocate. Speak up. Contact your elected officials. Tell them to support pandemic preparedness, fund scientific research, global health initiatives, that kind of thing.
Write those letters. Make those calls.
Exactly. Your voice matters. And don't forget about community. Talk to your friends and family. Share what you've learned. The more people who understand this threat, the more likely we are to do something about it.
It's like they say, 2 heads are better than 1, or in this case, a lot of heads.
Right. And hey, you can support the organizations working on this stuff too. The groups doing disease surveillance, vaccine development, global health outreach. Even a small donation can make a big difference.
Okay, so stay informed, advocate for change, support the people on the front lines. Got it.
Any other advice?
Yeah, take care of yourself. It's easy to get stressed out about all this. Make sure you're taking care of your mental and physical health, connect with loved ones, find healthy ways to cope with stress.
Good reminder.
That-
Because even with these global challenges, we can still take action. We can make a difference. That's the spirit. And that's what this deep dive is all about, giving you the knowledge and tools to navigate this crazy world. Avian flu is serious, yeah, but it's not unbeatable. If we work together, stay informed, and take action, we can protect ourselves and future generations.
I love that. That's a message of hope. This has been a fascinating deep dive.
Yeah.
A little scary, sure, but also really empowering. Thank you for breaking it all down for us.
Happy to do it.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this avian flu journey. Stay curious, stay informed, and stay healthy. We'll catch you next time on The Deep Dive.